Welcome to the She Self Cares podcast. I'm your host, BC, aka BC Bright, and this is the show where we dive deep into the world of self care, personal growth, and empowerment. Each week, we will explore the practices, stories, and strategies that help women like you prioritize their well being and live life to the fullness body, mind, and soul. If you're ready to embark and embrace your power, transform your life, and thrive in every area, then you are the right place. Let's get started. Thank you again so much for joining us today. I'm always excited to have our guest on, and I'm really excited to have this conversation because I feel like it's one of those that we have to have, especially in this day and age. And so before I start, I wanted to read this real quickly before I start. And it says, eating disorder do not discriminate. They are complex mental health disorders that can affect anyone regardless of age, sex, or race. So today again, we're going to have some amazing conversation, but then we just want to talk a little bit about, some your personal story as well. But let's start with introduction. Who is Andrea?
Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I think this would probably be the most honest I've ever been about my eating disorder. So I am excited to dive into this topic with you. I'm Andrea. I am 31 years old, based in Cape Town, and my job is I work as a makeup artist in the film and TV industry.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about how you get into your career as a makeup artist. It said, and you've been doing this for 8 years, so you are a professional in this space.
Well, what did they say? 10,000 hours, I think.
Yes.
So it is quite an interesting story. I did not study to become a makeup artist. After high school, I studied film and theatre acting for 3 years, and after that I took a gap year. I traveled through Europe a bit. I backpacked on my own for 6 weeks, did a little bit of soul searching. After that I came back, still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Did a 1 year like a course, a certificate in journalism. Hated that. And then in 2016, when I just finished my course, or almost finished it, my mom passed away. And she was actually a makeup artist. So when I was 16 years old, she started taking me to jobs, training me, and that's how I got like my pocket money. And I never thought that's the career I would follow. I was never really interested. And when she was gone, I just missed it so much. And at that stage, I was teaching drama classes to kids, and I was waitering or pairing. And then I started doing that for also a little bit of extra money. And when I found what really, really made me happy, it just exploded. And then after a year, I pushed all of the other side hustles to the side, and I started pursuing it full time.
Wow, that is actually an amazing story, because who would have thought? Wow. So will you say that your craft actually bring you closer to your mom right now? Do you feel like that's a connection for you?
I do think so. Sometimes I am, no, actually often I'm angry with myself for not appreciating her talent back then. But when you see like a painting but you've never painted before, you don't actually realize how much work goes into that. So okay. And then when I started pursuing it full time, I realized, wow, she was actually so good. There's so many questions I would love to ask her, but I'm figuring it out. And it is important to me. A lot of people say you're following in her footsteps, but it is also important to me to create my own legacy and not just kind of live in the shadow of the family tree, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That absolutely makes sense. Absolutely. Well, let's go deep into the conversation. We're talking about eating disorder, loving your body, and cultivating a healthy relationship with food. Because a lot of, there's so much data that I've talked about, especially younger kids nowadays. I think like 30 something percent is just really prominent now with eating disorder. And of course, there's so many different kind of eating disorders. And we don't want to really, we're not, there's no expert on this, so we don't want to go into data and details, whatever. We just want to talk about your personal story and able to learn from it, right? So what specific trigger do you notice that led to what came by? If you can just kind of take us a little bit of the story of how that became part of your past story or your story or whatever the case may be.
So it is sad to say, but often women's morphed ideas of their bodies comes from how they are raised. Often a very critical family member that from a young age forms the idea of your body. If they keep calling you a certain way, or they keep saying, oh, are you sure you want to eat that second cookie? And that kind of creates this idea in your head of, oh, I shouldn't eat that second cookie because I am fat, or why are they saying this? Or maybe the only way they will really love and accept me is if I am skinnier. And I've just noticed this pattern with a lot of women I've met that have also struggled with this, is often a critical family. They are very critical of them, a family member, whether it be a mother, a sister, an auntie, or a friend. And if it's somebody we love, we are more prone to internalize what they say. If it's a stranger on the internet, we are like, okay, whatever. But if it's someone we love and care about, we want to have their approval and want them to love us. And then, often it becomes a rabbit hole which you go down into. And,
Absolutely. So tell us about the history and how your story of how, maybe almost let's talk about how this started for you. Or did you ever, who was it diagnosed after a while, or you felt like, okay, I needed help, and then you spoke about it? There's different levels and different layers to this, right? Some people will have some this eating disorder that they can manage. You can never manage it, let's just be real, but that they can almost hide for a prolonged period of time under something else. So how did that progress with you? How did this start, and when did you notice or put a label on it or put the diagnosis on it?
So, often you don't even realize that you've gone through trauma. Only years later you realize, oh my word, that was not normal. And so at the time I didn't realize how bad it was. And I would say it was really bad around high school. I just basically starved myself. That's what I did. Everything revolved around me constantly thinking about food and then not allowing myself to have food. It's so funny, a while back I discovered a box of cards from friends that wrote to me in high school, and I found 2 cards from girlfriends that said, stop thinking you're fat, or you're not fat, or please remember to eat, and I was so shocked to think it was that bad that friends are writing letters to me saying that. I still have a picture that my mom still took, that I just wrote with permanent marker on my wall, Andrea plus food equals, and then like a sad face, because I just couldn't. You need food to survive. But if it's such an unhealthy relationship, how can you give it to yourself, So it was so complex in my mind that I couldn't navigate my way around how to actually have a healthy relationship with it. And that was kind of only later in my life when I would say, started recovering. I realized, how could I have cried for the reason that I'm fat, and I was absolutely completely underweight. So it was all in the mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was reading at the statistics and it says about when, like a study that found that 8% of 15-year-old girls died at severe level, and their risk of developing an eating disorder was 18 times greater than non-dieting peers. And 12% adolescent girls actually form some form of eating disorder. But out of that 12%, only 20% of those adolescents with this eating disorder actually seek treatment. And of course, it goes from that to adulthood. And you always wonder because I'm this is going to be real. I've always wondered. I've seen people that would, you will see them in public and they don't eat much. You feel like, okay, they don't eat anything. They're like salad people, right? And they're like, really nibbling on stuff. But then you're like, it doesn't correlate to where their body is, because eating disorder is different form. You can act like it in private as if you're eating well, right? And then we go into your little space and eat whatever, and maybe binge on it, or whatever the case may be. Because you always wonder, like, they look normal to you, they eat well in front of you, so it's not something that's written on the forehead. It's not someone that's wearing glasses that you can see. It's not somebody cutting themselves that you can also see. It's something that is so hard to kind of identify, right? So it's one of those, like, it's like, so how do you what will you say, especially when it comes to self-compassion now, as you get to this journey and you now understand where you're coming from. How can you practice self-compassion as you go on this healing journey? Because it's going to be a healing journey, literally it's going to be something that is there. I'm assuming that you have to always continue to take care of your mental health, or different ways, right? So how do you practice self-compassion for yourself as Andrea in this, as you go through your journey?
So I would say the first thing, if you realize you have a family member that is saying things that are hurting you, it's very difficult, but it's important to set a boundary with them and tell them, listen, it really hurts me when you talk about my body. I would appreciate it if we don't have this conversation again, or you make comments like that again. So that's very important.
Absolutely.
To set that boundary for yourself. And then secondly is you have to slowly but surely rewrite the narrative you have written for yourself in your mind, because you have now decided, I am fat, or I am not up to standard, or I'm ugly, and that is the narrative you have written for yourself. So now, even if you bullshit yourself for a bit, and you look at yourself in the mirror and you take a deep breath and you recognize what you're seeing. Okay, maybe my body isn't the way I want it to be, but what can it do? It's maybe my tummy looks a certain way, but I've made a child. I've carried a child. So maybe my legs are bigger, but they're strong and they can run. So you have to try and combat the negative thoughts with a positive one. That's what I've realized. And then slowly but surely practice that, until the negative thoughts become very little. Obviously we'll always have negative thoughts, but they become much less. That once a month sometimes I will look at myself in the mirror and then you just feel horrible.
Correct.
But then also realize where it's coming from. Realizing, okay, I feel horrible, but you know what, it's okay, it's probably just a feeling. And instead of absolutely internalizing that feeling, feel it and then let it pass.
Absolutely. I love that. And let's go back a bit, because you did mention, when you realize, this is maybe I'm either I'm skinny or I'm fat, whatever the case may that you're in your head. And we talk about almost from a child's perspective. What will you say to actually, because some child might not be able to have the kids, or younger adults might not be able to have the vocabulary to say, please don't say that to me. Please don't, I don't feel well about what you're saying. So now let's address that questions to like parents and adults. how to actually address and talk to people. Because again, we talk about the first thing you mentioned was how it came from somewhere, either some kind of, mostly trauma. It's what said to you, things that you saw that actually brought those kind of feelings most of the time, right? So let's now go back to adults in our lives on how to talk, especially to young people, because young people write these stories. You don't have to say you're fat, like, but if you're critical, right, like you said earlier, if you're critical to them, then they assume it's because I'm fat, even though you never said that, right? So how do you now go back and address how we, as an adult, start talking and to our kids, the young people around us, so that they would not have that perception of themselves as fat or skinny or ugly. Let's really talk about that real quick.
So I think I'm not a parent myself, so I cannot imagine how hard it must be to navigate your way around that, especially with the coming of social media, because now the comparison game is stronger than ever. But I think it's important to never ever put the emphasis on the way your child looks, but rather how they feel and are they healthy. And I think that was something, it was like a vicious cycle. So mine unfortunately came from my mother, and she told me she's saying these things to me because she can see I am unhappy with my body, but I was unhappy with my body because of the stuff she said. So it just kept going like in a vicious cycle. So the way I think it would have been better is to, if I made a comment like a teenager does, oh, I feel fat, is to not say, well, if you feel fat, stop eating so many cookies. Like, rather just dismiss it and say, I'm sorry you feel that way. I still think you're beautiful. Do you want to do something to make you feel better? And that something shouldn't be a negative reward, like eating, or it should be like, do you want to go sit outside in the garden, or do you to feel those feelings, really feel it, chat through it, and then just realize actually it's just a feeling and it's not the truth. It's my opinion of myself, but it's just an opinion.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. That actually makes so much sense. To actually go to the root of it, of the feeling, because a lot of time, 100% of the time, it's about how we feel, right? It's about what you see in the mirror and how you feel. And if somebody says to you, oh, if you said I always say I have a big forehead. That's my motto. But normally I would never wear my hair up. I'll wear it just to cover my forehead, because that's the, center of what I felt. And when I say that before, it was almost same thing. It's like, oh, I have a big forehead. And the suggestion would be, well, maybe you should have a bang, or do something. But I love the fact that you just mentioned going to the root of it, of the feelings, because it's about the feeling and an emotion behind it, right? It's saying, oh, wow, you don't feel good about that. Wow, okay. Well, why don't you feel good about that? Baby? Is there anything else I can do to help you feel better right now? Rather than what you mentioned and say, well, maybe you shouldn't put your hair up, or maybe you shouldn't eat too much, or maybe you should, just almost like
so that kind of, for them, giving you a solution almost feels like they are confirming
exactly
what you're thinking.
Exactly, which is absolutely true. They are literally confirming it, and especially even as adults, you still feel that way. Now imagine growing up, a young kids, when now they're just still forming their own opinion of themselves, right? They're still growing and developing. So I really love the fact that you mentioned that, like, going too deep into the feeling, how they're feeling, and the solution is not even just to rub it off, because ignoring it also is not going to go anywhere, right? It's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to make it even worse. But addressing it in the right way and kind of going through that deep feeling and emotion, how do we deal with it emotionally, spiritually, however you want to deal with it, in a positive way. I love that. So let's talk about one of the things that I've used in my life that really often helped me, of course, is affirmations and stuff like that. So is there anything specific in your life in terms of activities, affirmation, that you've incorporated into your routine that help you with your own body positivity?
Sure. I think the biggest thing for me is being flexible in my goals because I think the problem always was I will make these hard goals, and if I don't meet them, I'm a failure, So now, say my goal is to go exercise 3 times a week, okay? I don't have to go to gym 3 times a week and burn 1,000 calories. I just have to be active 3 times a week. And if I can't do 3 times a week, then I need to also be kind to myself and say, you know what, you did the best you could this week. You didn't do it to sabotage yourself.
Absolutely.
Because you wanted to go, but you couldn't. You were maybe really tired. And it's also important to listen to your body because I never, the concept of listening to my body is a very new concept that was introduced to me by my husband. Because before then, if you were tired, I would always be like, well, that's just in your mind. You either drink a coffee or you drink an energy drink or, but being tired is just, it's not an option. So you push yourself harder. And if you do that, you also create a very negative connection to exercise or anything that's actually such a positive thing. So yeah, that I cannot remember what the question was because I went so off route now. Affirmations.
Yeah, is there any activities or affirmations that you use that have helped you?
Yes, just I think that the biggest affirmation I had to learn was just my best is good enough. My best that I could give that week is good enough, and your best doesn't always look the same.
Absolutely.
So I would say that is the biggest thing that I had to teach myself.
Absolutely, I love that. Your best is good enough. I think that's absolutely amazing. And when you even talk about your goal, I mean, I think about the almost like a universal goal thing that we talk about, the SMART goals that we often talk about. To be specific, something measurable, something achievable. Because oftentimes we don't often make that goal that's quite achievable. Something relevant and also time bound. I think usually when we talk about SMART goals, which I think you kind of put it wrapped up in the quick sentence right there, which I really love, especially with this. You just because you're saying you're going to go to the gym to exercise 5 times a week doesn't mean that it has to be at the gym. It has to be at 9 in the morning or 6 in the morning. Yes, you can set that goal, obviously, because some people will work with time and your time is but is it measurable? Is it something that is achievable? Can you actually do that and wake up 5 in the morning every day while you have to go to work every day? So I love the fact that you're talking about the SMART goal and being something that you can actually do. And I think going back again when we talk about self-compassion as well, that even when you're not able to do it, for me, for example, if I'm not able to do something that I set myself to, I always say to myself, tomorrow is another day. I'm going to try again tomorrow. Full stop. There's no, it doesn't, I don't question my worthiness because of that. I try not to question my, my, whatever the case may be. No question asked. Tomorrow is another day. We'll try again. And if it doesn't happen tomorrow, I'll try again. Right. But,
and I wanted to say that that's the issue with comparison that I also realized was, oh, but that person's getting up at 5 in the morning. So which means me only going at 10 or only waking up at 7 that's bad, but people are so different, and like you say, we don't see what else goes on in that person's life. And I've seen mothers especially are so hard on themselves. My friends that have children, then I'm like, you have a whole child that you are raising. You cannot expect yourself to do all these other things that people without kids are doing.
Absolutely. And there's season for it. I often talk young, well, my kids are a bit older. They're 15. I have a set of twins. And I often say that, like, if I'd known what I know, it's always hard to say sometimes. But it's like, it's a season for everything. I often look at young mom even nowadays when, again, nothing wrong with it, but you have young kids, but you want to exercise 5 days a week. You want to eat right. You still want to, like, there's a season for it. Choose what works for you at the season. Because guess what? You're going to get to the stage. I'm in that stage. My kids are a little older. I can go to the gym 2 hours every morning and I don't have to worry about anything because I don't have kids to, to wake me up at night anymore. But I think again, like you said, when we compare ourselves, and now with the social media world, and you see somebody carrying a baby and they're still typing, and I'm like, I get it, but I don't think it's also a badge of honor when you're like pushing yourself to the extreme. Sometimes, if it works for you, some people can handle it, but it often seems like this is the way. I always talk about the 5 ways. Everybody have their own expert. Everybody's an expert on social media now. 5 ways to live right. I'm like, until you live to 90, you can't really tell me that you know the 5 ways to live long life. You know what I'm saying? So it's just
Yeah.
really that comparison, like you mentioned. It's very important. So let's talk about mindful eating. Is there any way that you've incorporated that into your own kind of lifestyle in terms of being mindful now, especially with your journey?
I think it's actually so amazing that I'm doing this podcast with you now, because I feel now I'm in the healthiest relationship with
Wow.
food in my entire life. Um, my issue was, and I think a lot of people restrict, and this is good, but we can't not ever have an ice cream or a chocolate or a
Absolutely.
bag of chips, or, we have to live as well. I mean, what would your life have been without a wimpy milkshake?
Woo.
Um, so, so I would never allow myself to have any treats in the house, because if I had it, I would eat everything, and that is from the binge eating as well. So not allowing myself anything and then eating everything. And for the first time in my entire life, I have a cupboard with snacks, going from chippies to little chocolates to some diddle daddles, all kinds of nice things that I am now able to look at and say, it's there. I don't have to eat it all, because tomorrow it will still be there. And I am allowing myself to incorporate this into my daily, eating routine, or eat the daily, diet. Not that I'm
Yeah.
on a diet, but you know what I mean,
Yeah.
eating plan. Um, and enjoy it. And every evening I'm now allowing myself something like a treat, which has completely taken away my restrictive mindset.
Yes.
And rather having something in moderation than restricting and then eating it all. But I know, me saying this, it's not going to change someone's life, because it's such a long road. You have to walk little step by step to get to that
Yes.
eventual point. I actually still can't believe, I'm still scared that this is just a phase and then I'm going to go back, because it's happened so often, where it goes well and then you relapse again. So, but I do think, this is a very healthy space that I feel like I'm finding myself in. I don't feel hungry or restricted or anything like that. And it's good. Food is such a part of your
Yeah.
culture and your life,
Yeah.
and as being social, that I don't want to restrict myself from it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it sounds like it's more of a lifestyle, having something that's a lifestyle rather than just, because I found, for me personally, I found like dieting doesn't work for me because, again, like you said, you can lose a few pounds, but then you rebound and just like you just go back deep down again and it's worse than it was. And then you mentally beat yourself up more because now you felt like you failed, right? You felt like you
Yes.
set a goal that you failed in your goals and stuff. So why not find something, again, that's why it's called the smart goal, something that you can actually step by step. I think one of my biggest things is just talking about how the world we live in right now, which is this social media world, like just telling us that you have to look a certain way or do the certain thing, and if you don't do it, almost feel like you're a loser. And I think we just have to change our mindset from it and really start going back to the of understanding your own journey. You know what I'm saying? Like you just talk about how you got to this journey of now you can have a cupboard with some snacks and there's that it's there,
Yes.
right? But
And the
that's
one thing
no.
sorry.
Go ahead.
The one thing I've also noticed with women is it doesn't matter how you look. If you just own it, people, if you just exude confidence, people are like, wow,
Yeah.
that she's beautiful, she's great. Where, I mean, say you take a woman that's, say a bigger in societal standards, and she exudes confidence and she just
Yes.
owns it, like, this is my body and I love it. She's often found, more attractive by society than the woman that's smaller, but she kind of has
Yeah.
this energy. And that's the thing I've just realized is sometimes I see things, or I have a pimple, and then I'm like, you know what? If I just own it, then people can't say, oh, that's something she should be ashamed of. Because if you aren't ashamed, then people can't shame you for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I often say it's like somebody writing fat on your forehead, but in a different language. You have no
Mm,
idea what it means. If I say fat in my language and you put it on your forehead, when you read it, what do you care? You don't
mm,
understand it. So that's where my
uh,
mindset now. Like whatever you call me, I don't care because in my head it makes no sense. It makes whatever
yeah,
your English for fat is, it makes no sense for me. Whatever.
mm,
So I just feel like whatever is my fault, I don't care. I'm gonna hone
mm.
who I am, and I know it's not always easy. It's a journey, like you've been saying. It's a journey. But let's now move to the support system. How hopefully I'm hopeful that what our support system and people in your life really play a role in your healing process. And I guess another part of that question would be, how do you communicate your need to them?
So I think the person you will be spending the most time with is often a partner or a spouse. And I can tell you, my husband has been like, yeah, I don't know if I would have been where I am in my journey with healthy relationship with food and exercise if it wasn't for him. He, if I would go through my times and I would be like, oh, I feel fat and I feel ugly, he will just say, you're still beautiful to me. He will just, and he has just created such a soft and nurturing space. And then he would also slowly, in the beginning of our relationship, he would try to get me to make a more positive connection with exercise. So, for instance, say I would say, yes, all I want to do now is just drink a bottle of wine. Then you'll say, okay, well, do you want to go get a bottle of wine? We can walk to the liquor store. Okay, so he wouldn't say, that's bad, let's rather go exercise. He kind of, and then slowly but
Wow.
surely he, got me to, so now he'll be like, oh, there's a cute market. Do you want to walk to the market? Or let's go. And yeah, he really played such a big
Oh,
role.
that's
It's also
amazing.
very important, and it's your responsibility to communicate to your partner
Yeah.
your your traumas and your triggers around food and whatever. Obviously, you are still solely responsible for your
Correct.
triggers, but because they love and care for you and they would like to be part of your healing journey, they can be more aware of how to communicate to you around that,
Absolutely.
kind of sensitive topic. And yeah, that is just, he has been the biggest support for me and part of my healing journey. And now I cannot believe where I am with actually liking exercise. Never in my life I thought I would be that person. Because my mom never exercised, and she just said, we aren't active people, we don't like it. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's that then. So I'm not an active person. But now I realize, no, I love it. And it doesn't have to be perfect,
Yeah.
but walking to go get a coffee, or
Mm.
yeah, I enjoy it.
That's amazing. I love that. I love the fact that you talk about your spouse because not everybody has the spouse sometimes, but but it comes in different ways, right? What other ways, or how do you, besides spouse, just from your own experience, how do you cultivate or find those kind of support system? Because you might be single, you might be someone, but how do you kind of cultivate that to be able to find a support system that will help you in this journey, that can help someone in this journey?
So I think setting boundaries with people will often show you who is okay with you setting that boundary and they still want to be part of your life, and who doesn't like you setting a boundary. And often those people should then just gently be let go because they are not contributing to your healing journey.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have a spouse, I mean, anybody that you spend a lot of time with, your sister, your parents, your best friend, all of those people that should care about you.
Absolutely.
You can communicate your needs in them helping you heal. And it's difficult to set those boundaries, but respect is how people treat you when they don't like what you're doing.
Say that again. Respect is how people treat you when they don't like what you're doing.
Because they can treat you with respect as long as they like what you're doing. But if you set a boundary saying, I cannot go out tonight, I feel tired, and they then treat you with disrespect, then they never really respected you in the first place.
Absolutely.
And those people that stick around after you have respectfully set a boundary for yourself, that's your community.
I love that. That is so, I love that. That is amazing. I'm going to make sure we show that clip. That is amazing. I love it. How do you, I think we kind of talk about it a little bit, but how do you challenge your negative thoughts? Because like you said earlier, it's never going to go away. It's going to be something that either with food, with life, whatever the case may be, we're often going to have that negative thoughts. What strategies can you use that you've used to reframe your own negative thoughts about your body and food?
So I think what's also important is the fact that when you're feeling something, we automatically quickly label this feeling. So this is a good feeling or this is a bad feeling. But when you're feeling something, try not judge the feeling and just say, okay, I am feeling this way. And then often, if it's not a nice feeling, we try to get away from it. So we do something, we mindlessly scroll, or we eat or smoke a cigarette or whatever. And often the healing lies in the center of that terrible feeling, which is not nice. But sometimes if you just allow yourself to feel it, and there's different ways you can draw a bath and maybe just sit with it, listen to some music, and you'll see how often you just start crying. And you're like, I don't even know why I'm crying, but you're crying for something that happened 15 years ago, but you've bottled it up so long. And then, of course, the good old journaling.
I love it.
Just writing down those feelings. And for long, I didn't want to journal because I thought it had to be this poetic, where sometimes I write thoughts, it doesn't even make sense. But I'm just getting it out. Because I feel like if it's just in my head, it's like rolling around like a bunch of marbles. And then when I put it down on paper, it gets, order. And I can see, this is what I'm feeling and this is what I'm thinking. I would say, don't judge what you are feeling. Try and just feel it. And try and sit with it for a while. If it's really, really something you can't sit with now, try and breathe through it and kind of maybe do a visualization exercise. So sometimes I see, like I'm standing on the side of the road, and there's like heavy traffic, and the traffic are the thoughts.
Yeah.
And you can either jump in the middle of the traffic and get caught in those thoughts and feelings, or you can just kind of observe and let them pass.
I love that. That's beautiful. This is what I not often do, but I do sometimes, but I used to do, I should say, that now that you mentioned that kind of came up to me. I'm like, I used to do that, but now I think I'm going to pick it up again. I often think about a train that's moving, a moving train, but all the doors are open. And so when I'm feeling something, I try to bring it up to the surface, whatever it is, I deal with it, and I throw it inside that train to get it away. Like I literally visualize myself getting that feelings out, getting that emotion out. If I'm exhausted or angry or something that triggered me, I try to get it out visualize what exactly it is, and I literally throw it into the train as it moves and just clear it away from me. And I do it over and over and over again. And sometimes 30 minutes later, I'm like, I'm in this mindfulness stage of really being still for 30 minutes, just kind of bringing all this stuff that just comes from nowhere. And I'm able to get them out and throw them in there. And I'm like, okay, that was a beautiful thing. But now that you mentioned it, I need to go back to that again. I never, but I think that was,
And I mean, different stuff works
yes,
for. So I mean, try everything and see what works for you. And also, not the same stuff works on the same day. Some
absolutely.
days I just have to be angry. I just have to be angry. I have to go work in the garden, or I have to get the anger out. Then breathing
Absolutely.
is not going to help for me. But I think getting to know yourself like that is, I think, the best
Absolutely.
way.
I love that. I love that. So just kind of exploring, and then I really do, because I feel like, again, we have been, everything people are telling us nowadays is about, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, this is how, but there's no one, there's not a cookie cutter of this is how you deal with your emotion. It's not a cookie cutter of you do one thing, and the only way you will know is by exploring as many things as possible and finding out what works for you. I mean, you just talked about earlier on how you went to school, you even went to journalism school for a year, you've done all this stuff to be able to finally find what is you. But you have to have the courage to do as many things to find what works for you. So I think if any of our listeners, if you're listening to this, in everything again, maybe you pick up is explore different things, right? And find out what works for you. Know who you are and what works for you. I love that.
And don't be afraid to fail.
Absolutely, it's never a failure though. Like I'm saying, reprogramming my brain about failure. Like it's never, failure should not even be in your dictionary, because it's not, you tried something, it didn't work out, but we learn from it. And I know we hear that over and over again, right? But really, I feel like it's something that we have to completely restructure our brain and say it's never a failure. So even when I'm afraid, because my line of work, I have to, like, proposer and stuff like that, and it used to scare the life out of me, and it still does. But I've got to the point that when I want to send something out, I say to myself, it's either a yes or no. Yes, great. No, great. Whatever. And I just move on. Sent. That's it. But the fear holds also back. So you often hold us down, that you're like, okay, it doesn't matter. It's never a failure. It's a learning process. They didn't do that. Maybe I need to restructure. Maybe it's not for them. Oh well, on to the next one. Tomorrow is another day.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that also comes with confidence.
Absolutely. It does work with that. So now let's talk about finding joy in food. And I think that was so exciting to me, because oftentimes, especially with your journey, we might not even, most people cannot even put joy and food together. Right? It's like food, joy, they don't even come together. So have you rediscovered the joy of eating and view of food as a source of nutrition for you rather than guilt in your journey?
So I have truly tried every diet there is. I swear to you, I don't know if there's anything I haven't tried. But as you say, even with all of those horrible, diets, everything I did still taught me a lesson. And I'm not saying try every single diet to learn from it, because sounds like you as well. I don't really believe in a set eating plan, because that's not the way life works, then you're going away for a weekend with friends, and I don't want to go with my Tupperware of broccoli when I'm, away with friends for the weekend. But something that has really, really helped me is identifying what do I love. That is healthy food. So I love fruit. I love yogurt. I love bread and pasta. I love that, I'm not a salad for lunch kind of gal. I love a sandwich and a wrap and all those things. So instead of not having that, I have tried to, how can I incorporate this in my daily plan without feeling guilty, So also it's nice for me to follow different pages
Yes.
with nutritional tips and stuff like that that have positive nutritional
Yes.
tips. Some pages can still be a bit triggering, obviously, because they have very extreme views on things.
Yeah.
But finding joy in food has also just been, when I have the time, it's nice for me to make myself a pretty meal. You know, for breakfast this morning, I had a piece of toast with some scrambled eggs, with some beautiful tomatoes and mushroom, and then just sit and be like, wow, look at this pretty meal I made for myself. And what's also helped me is I work quite long hours and we work on far away locations and whatever. I like to prep just a breakfast for me to take with, because that feels like it's a nice way to start my day. And it's so nice when I open my Tupperware, how many people are like, wow, that looks nice. And then it's something simple like some yogurt with fruit on it, you know. But an alternative would have maybe been a pack of knickknacks or whatever. So that just kind of makes me feel good again, like, oh, look at this effort I did for myself. You know, and my body, I'm not doing this because I feel like I can't eat anything else. It's nice, it's something I enjoy. And if you like a sandwich, back a sandwich. It just also makes you feel like I'm worthy of having this beautiful, delicious, nutritional meal. And that's something I've found, putting joy back into food.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And especially like you said, just kind of having something that you made and it's pretty and it's beautiful and it's healthy for you. The feeling is just amazing. And the amazing part of our brain is when our brain picks up. I often tell people like the way the brain works is sometimes it doesn't differentiate and say, "Oh, Andrea picks up, open a nice yogurt with fruit that's pretty." It does. The brain doesn't. The brain sees something that's exciting, and it's like, "Oh, we're excited right now. I'm going to release some juicy hormones, some serotonin to help her feel so excited." That's all the brain sees. Like the neurotransmitters in our brain. That's what they see. So the same amount of way your body react to you opening up a beautiful meal that's healthy for you and you're joyous about it. It's the same kind of feeling when you see somebody give you $1 million. Your brain sees it the same way, and your brain reacts to it the same way. So it's just the neurotransmitter. It's the same thing. It's the same process. It doesn't matter. So those little breaks when you feel like, oh my God, I made this amazing meal, and someone compliments this amazing meal that you've took to nourish your body, your brain sees it almost like you won $1 million. Your brain sees almost like you actually even. It is a very interesting thing. Your brain also sees it as having almost like when you take an antidepressant, the medication. Same effect. It's the same effect as your brain has. It releases serotonin to your system, thinking you're taking an antidepressant, and it makes you more happy, which is amazing.
One thing that I remember now that I never wanted to eat a meal. I would have tiny little snacks throughout the day. So I would have a apple, a Provita, and I would never feel satisfied. And I also stopped doing that because it brings me so much joy to make myself a beautiful big breakfast, a nice lunch. And that's also brought back joy for me because I can now eat a proper meal instead of just having these little bites throughout the day that doesn't even really do anything.
Because you're mindful, they're not, because you're not, it's almost like lack of mindfulness. You're just eating something just because, rather than being mindful and enjoying that big meal. And like you said, like we mentioned as well, really figuring out what works for you. Some people might like this little small meals that works for them, but finding the joy in what works for you, I think it's very interesting. I'm going to say one more thing before I have to wrap up real quick because we're running out of time. I literally just read an article about they were trying to do a new medication for losing weight. And so they did the study on rats. And then they have different, group that they had. And they found that one specific group of the rats actually lost weight faster, even with junk food. And then they couldn't figure out for a long time, but later they found out that this experimental group, the difference was when the person that was feeding them the junk food was feeding them, It actually pat them on the head and gave them to them nicely and was gracious to them and took his time to
Aw.
feed them. And so they felt that love and that compassion. And so even though it was junk food, they actually lost weight because
The
of their
intention
feeling. The
around the
intention
meal
around the
as
meal
well.
and the feeling around the meal actually helped them lose
Aw.
weight faster.
Aw.
So I'm like, that's just so much about that feeling. Exactly. And that kind of capture everything that we're saying right now. Like, oh, that is just beautiful. But yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about, celebrating milestones and really quickly because it kind of goes in here because we said earlier when we, especially as women as well, I'm sure for everybody, but especially as women, we often have this big goal. I want to lose 20 pounds. And
Mm.
because I'm not losing that 20 kilo or 10 kilo, whatever the goal is, even if I lose three, I still don't celebrate it.
Mm.
Celebrating our progress, how that's been for you, and able to celebrate small milestones. I think you mentioned it earlier actually. Celebrating small milestones, while you celebrate and in your healing process, not just waiting for that big goal. Is that something that you've kind of noticed, and do you take time now to actually celebrate your small wins? And I think you did mention that earlier, but we can wrap up with that.
Okay. I do, but I think in the past I've been too goal driven, and that has actually been a downfall for me. So it is important to, like you mentioned earlier, actually just creating a lifestyle and taking it day by day. And what comes from that is a bonus. And of course, it should be celebrated, but
Yes.
that shouldn't be your main overall focus. And if you don't meet that, then everything I did was for
Yeah.
nothing, because it wasn't for nothing. You still nourished your body, you still moved it, and you still celebrated it for what it can do. And if you did lose weight or build muscle or whatever, or your pants are fitting a bit looser, then great.
Great.
But that shouldn't be your main goal. And that's what has helped me, is not being so hard on myself and having such hard set goals.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. So, as we wrap up, what I would ask one thing and say, if anyone is listening to this, especially, I mean, let's address the younger one and someone also older, especially someone younger saying, I hear you, Andrea. I'm going through the same thing right now, but I don't even know what to do, how to do it. What advice will you give that person? And what advice will you give someone that you will give yourself as well today?
I would say write down what you are feeling, because it is amazing in a few years when you have continued on this journey to look back and see how far you have actually come. And just practice as much as you can to just put that negative little voice to the back and try and argue with it, challenge it a bit, say, how can you, why are you saying, look at this, I've got so much to look forward to when I get up in the mornings, that my 5 kilograms that I'm now overweight or whatever, it's not my biggest worry. Perspective is very important. So be sure to also give yourself a little bit of perspective, in terms of what you have to be grateful for and what else out there is more intense than your problem. Not that yours is not important, but perspective is important.
Absolutely.
To be able to make you feel like, okay, maybe it's not that bad.
Absolutely. Oh my Lord, this has been amazing, amazing
That's
hour. I
really
can't believe
good.
the hour is past, but this has been so amazing. We always say at the end of all of our podcasts and say we have three things that we want to do. We want to encourage, educate, and equip women. And thank you, Andrea, because you've done all three for us today. So thank
Oh,
you.
thank you so much. It's been lovely, and what an honor that you decided that I am worthy of coming onto your podcast. It's a real honor.
Absolutely. And if somebody's trying to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
They can find me on Instagram at chameleon_queen SA. Yeah, that's where you can find me. I'm on that app most of the time. And can I please take a little screenshot of us?
Absolutely.
So I can post
Yes,
it?
absolutely.
Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Cute. Okay, awesome. Thank you so
Awesome. Thank you
much.
so much. This has been amazing. Thank you. Thank you. And we can't wait to hear amazing stuff about you. We know the sky is just the beginning, not even the limit for you. And we're just really excited to follow your journey and to continue to be in touch with you. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the She Self Care Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave a review to help others find us. Remember, self care is a journey, not a destination, and you deserve every moment of it. Until next time, keep shining and taking care of yourself, body, mind, and soul. You've got this.